Hey, everybody, this is Craig Garber. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, and we've got a special guest crawl out of his sickbed to spend some time with us. And we're with the one and only Jay Blakesberg. He's an incredibly successful photographer. He's been around a really long time. You've seen his photos, whether you know that they were his photos or not. A couple of quick announcements. I want to thank Mike Ganser from Aqueous for connecting us, but I could have probably asked 1,000 musicians or more that know Jay, but thanks, Mike. And
yeah,
also,
thanks, Mike.
Yeah, very cool. Also, make sure you go to everyonelovesguitar.com/subscribe, and you can subscribe to both the YouTube channel and the show. And Carlos Santana, Joe Walsh, love to have those guys on my show, so if you can connect us, please do. All righty. Talk about Jay. Grew up in New Jersey. Photographed his first Grateful Dead show at the Meadowlands in 1978. In 86, he became the house photographer at the rock club, the I-Beam on Haight Street in San Francisco. And this is where he began to photograph the birth of the alternative rock movement, shooting such bands as Jane's Addiction, the Pixies, and Soundgarden, just to name a few. A year later, November 87, with rumors of a free U2 concert in downtown San Francisco, Jay got a call from Rolling Stone magazine photo editor Jody Peckman to go and cover the event. This became Jay's first published photo in the rock magazines. And since that first assignment, Jay shot over 300 assignments for Rolling Stone. He's been published in print magazines from Time to Vanity Fair to Guitar Player, as well as hundreds of other magazines worldwide. Most of the 90s, Jay was constantly shooting for print magazines and record companies. And when the dot-com boom of the late 90s came, corporations also came calling to him. He worked with artists like Weezer, Phish, X, Radiohead, DJ Shadow. I love that guy's stuff. Tom Waits, John Lee Hooker, Santana, Brian Wilson, Willie Nelson, Metallica, Talking Heads, Beck, Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, Tom Petty, and loads of others. Right before September 11th, 2001, 9/11, Jay secured a book deal to publish a coffee table book on his Grateful Dead archive. Working on that project inspired him to start his own book publishing company, which eventually was born as Rock Out Books, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Jay's either published or packaged well over a dozen books of his own photography as well as others. His latest book, or his last 2 books ago, which you definitely need to get your hands on, is called Guitars That Jam, Portraits of the World's Most Storied Rock Guitars. It's right here. Jay was kind enough to send me a copy. We'll talk about anybody that plays guitar. You should buy this book right away. Go to rockoutbooks.com. It's such a cool, I mean, we'll talk about it, but it's great, man. It's got like very concise summaries of tons of really interesting guitars along with the player that plays them. And the photos are freaking great. And he also has a brand new Jerry Garcia book, which we'll talk about, or that's his latest book, I should say. Along with, back to the Guitars That Jam book, basically every guitar's make and model is in there, and it's accompanied by a story from the actual musician itself talking about the instrument's special characteristics, as well as some like nostalgic significance to them as well. It has photographs of Neil Young, Carlos Santana, Jerry Garcia, Bob Weir, Phil Lesh, Trey Anastasio, Derek Trucks, anybody that's really good at plays guitar is in this book. Jay's got hundreds of album package credits, including the Grateful Dead, as well as all the individual members of the Dead. Charlie Hunter, who we had here on the show a while ago. Dramarama, man, which is a good band. I have a couple of their records, man, like actual records when they came out.
Vinyl, greatest record ever.
Yeah. They did a cover of a Stone song.
Yeah.
It was great.
It's on that record vinyl. Turner, what is it?
Turner. Yeah. Memo right? From Turner. Yeah, man. Good memory there. Dude, that was good. Memo, because it's not a song that's like, play Memo from Turner. It's a great song, but they never played it. Mother Hips, so we had Greg Loyacano here on the show. Smash Mouth, he did Fushu Mang. Robin Ford's albums covers. We've had Robin on the show. Carlos Santana, Blues Traveler. Man, I had Chan Kinchla on here. What an interesting dude he is.
Yeah.
Alice in Chains, Joe Satriani we had on the show as well. B.B. King and John Lee Hooker, as well as dozens of others. He also has producer and director credits for loads of music festivals, including Modown Festival, Mountain Jam, Mile High Music Festival, and shows with the String Cheese Incident, Widespread Panic, Black Crowes, Allman Brothers Band, and many others. Dude, I'm exhausted just from reading this. Thanks so much coming on the show, man. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. So, we'll just jump right into Carlos Santana. So I did the back cover of Supernatural.
Oh, man.
99, 20 years ago or 20 years ago this last year. Now we're in 2020. The big breakout record, and nobody had any idea what that record was going to do, obviously. And so the back cover is actually a live shot. Carlos, I had shot a show recently. He saw the photo. He really loved it. He threw it on the back cover of Supernatural. But they didn't really do a publicity shoot, and there's no portraits of Carlos for the record. So they hired me, the record company hired me to do publicity photos for Carlos. So we went up to his house up in Marin County. Doesn't live in this house anymore. Big, beautiful house, great grounds, had a little side cottage which was his sort of studio and sanctuary and hang space. And we probably started shooting at like 10 or 11 in the morning. And at lunchtime, when we were just all sitting around eating lunch in his studio, me, my assistant, the stylist, he just started telling us stories about playing at Woodstock on acid.
Holy shit.
Just like melting and like a snake in his hands. And
he was on acid when he played that great set?
Oh, yeah. He was tripping his brains out, man. Oh, yeah. It's legendary. But it was just great to hear Carlos tell that story, from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And just, incredible. And then around 2:30 in the afternoon, he said, listen, I got to go and pick up my son at school at the Golden Gate Bridge. His son went to this school in San Francisco called the School of the Arts, which is actually right near my house. And so we were like, okay, great. We'll see you in about an hour. You'll come back and we'll keep shooting. He's like, no, we're done. Right. And I was like, okay. But I mean, at that point, from like 11 to 2:30, like we had already done like 5 or 6 different setups and wardrobe changes. I mean, we had a lot of pictures. And so we were just done, and he split. And when I work with artists, a lot of times it's like hard to get an artist to approve 3, 4, 5 photos from a session. And he approved something like 75 photos from that shoot. And so Thank God he did, because Supernatural became Supernatural, 50 million records worldwide. And my photos were everywhere. And from a financial side of things, the record company just hired me to do publicity photos. So I owned all the rights to it except for publicity rights. And so every time somebody wanted to use a photo for like an ad campaign, because everybody was all over Carlos for everything, his management people would be like, okay, yeah, you want to use this photo? Great. Contact Jay Blakesberg. He owns it. And it was also sort of like the beginning of really the internet exploding. And there were all these new Latino websites that wanted to use photos. Everybody wanted a piece of Supernatural at that time. And so for me, financially, it was like one of my biggest, financially rewarding photo shoots that I ever did, as well as creatively. There was so much great stuff of Carlos from that shoot that I love to this day, portraits that still stand the test of time. And just, it was just a great day overall. March of '99 is when we did that shoot.
That's so cool, man. Thank you for telling me. I had no clue that he was on. That's one of the greatest rock performances. I mean, you hear his SG there. It's like, bam, that was his sound for the next 40 years, Amazing.
Oh, you mean at Woodstock?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Just
I'm
incredible.
actually reading the Carlos Santana biography right now, and he talks about, that SG and how it was one of his first guitars. So
that's really cool.
Yeah. Discovered Paul Reed Smith. I mean, I think, isn't that what he mostly played?
That's
Gibson, Les Pauls and SGs, or I guess the SGs are they were Les Pauls in the early '60s, right?
Correct. That's correct. Yeah, man.
Or maybe they were SGs and then became Les Pauls or no, the other way around.
No, they were Les Pauls and became,
He wanted to change it. He didn't want it to be called a Les Paul because he didn't like the way it looked or something like that.
Correct. Yeah. I was going to ask you this later, but since you kind of mentioned something relevant to it, how has the internet? Because, okay, you said everybody was paying for images. That kind of concept of paying for them, how did that impact you? And like, what kind of I'm like, how did that impact you initially? And like, is there any way for you to protect your intellectual
the genie
property?
Back in the bottle?
No, to protect your IP, your intellectual property.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I do. I create IP. I create intellectual property and license it across multiple platforms. I mean, I view social media and the internet as a great place to get my work out there and let people see it and know that they can come to me for images. And so, yeah, I mean, the business has changed. I mean, first of all, when we all switched to digital, I started shooting film 40 something ago. And so I had to reinvent myself and learn all of these new skills on the computer. We used to shoot films, send to the lab and develop it, and send out prints that we made in a dark room, or slides that we, process to magazines and record companies, and keep track of that stuff. And then we had to learn the whole digital aspect of this and sort of reinvent ourselves creatively, because all of a sudden, when we shot film, we had all these different flavors of film. You had black and white, you had color, you had 35 millimeter, 2 1/4, medium format, 4x5, 8x10, large format, panoramic, half frame, toy cameras. You had all these different tools that you could play with, camera wise and lens wise. And then all of a sudden we started shooting digital, and everybody had the same 3 lenses and the same sensor. And it's like, okay, how do you, set yourself apart? And early on, I started working with a full-time retoucher in my studio to sort of come up with a look and a feel to make my photos look a little bit different. I wanted my pictures to look like film. I didn't want them to look like digital. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I didn't really get into video early on, because I hated the way low-budget video looked. It looked like a soap opera. It looked like bad video, right?
Right.
As the technology has changed, it's become a different thing. But, technology has basically lowered the bar for entry across the board.
Absolutely.
And so there's a lot, everybody in the world will be like, yeah, hey, big rock star, give me a photo pass and I'll give you all the photos you want for free.
Right.
And, and also everybody has a phone in their pocket, and so it really has become a different playing field, and we've had to learn how to navigate it. I do protect my IP. I do watermark everything that I send out. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff out there on the internet that's attributed to me that has no watermark on it. Right now there's a lot of companies out there that have little, internet bugs and worms that can go out there and find unauthorized usages. And you can, join these companies or pay these companies and they'll look for things. And, listen, I mean, some people are very kind, and they say, hey, I saw a picture of you that you took on Facebook, and I make it my Facebook cover photo. And I'm like, yeah, of course. It's like,
right.
Joe Blow in, Des Moines, Iowa, who wants to put a picture of Jerry on his Facebook page. I'm not going to, you can't stop that. But when, a guitar pedal manufacturer wants to use my photos, on their social media, they should be paying me.
Yeah. Commercial purposes. Absolutely, man.
That stuff. What's the name of that company that makes the really cool blank boards to put your pedals on? Is it Pedal Train?
That's one of them. Yeah, there's a bunch.
Yeah,
of
like it's and they contacted me early on. They were very, very kind. They said, hey, because I shoot a lot of pedals when I go to shows, because there's a lot of gearheads out there, and they want to see that. And sometimes I do it a lot, and sometimes I don't do it for months. It's funny, I haven't done it for months and months. And I was at Dead & Co. New Year's Eve, and I went on stage and shot John Mayer's new pedal board, just because there's always people saying, I want to see what Mayer's pedals are, what kind of cute you have. And so that Pedal Train people, they contacted me. They're like, hey, we love all your pedal photos. Is it okay if we occasionally tag you and post something? We're a brand new company. And I was like, yeah. They're like, listen, we're happy to send you pedal boards. I'm like, I don't play, I send my a little bit. They're like, well, when he needs one, you just let us know, And it's like, I don't need to charge some company just starting out $200 to use a photo,
Sure.
But like I said to them, I said, as you grow, get back to me and we'll work something out. You'll pay me money. And like, fine with that. So, I try and be flexible with my photos, but I also feel like I don't want to be taken advantage of.
And it's really hard. It's a hard balance to walk sometimes, because you had one person asking your question, sure, but you probably have 25 people a month asking your question. So it gets to the point where, I'm sure it's
and I do my own social media. So I respond to people, and I try and let people know that it's okay. Like, if you're just a fan, it's okay. Most of everything I put on social media now has got watermarks on it. So it's got my name.
Right.
I hope that people don't crop it out, but sometimes it happens.
Oh, people do that. They crop your name out.
Well, sometimes they do it intentionally.
Yeah.
Maliciously, and sometimes they do it because they're trying to make it fit on Instagram, and it's square, and it's a horizontal photo, and it's in the bottom left corner.
Yeah.
But people are good about it. People get it. I mean, I've had a couple of instances recently where people have been like painting my photos and then selling them, and I've had to kind of nip that in the bud. People reproduce, taking my photo, drawing it or painting it or whatever, and I'm like, no, you can't do that. You got to stop. The guy did that, and I said, it's cool. You made 3 pieces. I'm going to have you donate this one to a silent auction for a charity to raise some money. You can sell the other 2, but you can't do it anymore.
Oh, that was very fair of you.
Yeah,
like, really fair.
I don't, the guy's like trying to make a living. He's an artist. He's selling something for $300-400 maybe. It's like I don't want his $100. I'd rather say you donate this $400 this charity, which was I made him do,
right?
And they got to raise money and they got to make their $400 for the charity. And I said, in exchange, you can sell those other 2 pieces, but you can't do anymore.
That's it. Yeah, it's good that you got to draw limits, man, because if you don't, you'll be like, you'll be like the, the Pied Piper leading everything.
It's true. Like I always used to say, and a lot of my friends used to say this also, once the free guy or once the cheap guy, you're the cheap guy forever.
100%, man.
Yeah, I'll shoot that show for you for $100. You're going to be the $100 guy forever.
Absolutely.
That, we all have bills to pay. And,
yeah,
some of these artists are out there getting, 20, 30, 50, 80, 100, 200, 300, $500,000 a night to play.
Yes.
And they can afford to hire a photographer and pay them $500, $700, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, whatever it is.
Right.
It's in, it makes sense. And, everybody needs to, it's not going to change that artist's life to pay somebody, X amount of dollars so they can pay their bills.
Man, plus they're not playing for free.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so it should be, it's a no-brainer. It's like, it's the way things work, man.
But the problem is there are a lot of photographers that are very good out there that are hobbyist photographers. They have full-time jobs doing IT or tech or sales, whatever, selling insurance. They're like, oh yeah, give me a photo pass and I'll give you some photos for your website, you just kind of sort of figure it out, right?
Yeah.
You gotta figure out what works for you.
Sure, man. It sounds like you're doing a good job. So let's start back at the beginning, man. You saw the Dead at the Meadowlands in '78, Jay.
Yeah, I started going to see live rock and roll in about 1970. Well, I saw my first concert in '75. I didn't bring a camera. I was in 9th grade. It was Madison Square Garden, Halloween night, the Doobie Brothers, the Outlaws, and Poco. And
what a show, man. Imagine.
Yeah, great show. I mean, I love the Doobies still to this day. They're friends of mine. And like 30 years, 40 years after that first show that I ever shot them, they hired me to do photos for them, and they walk in my studio in San Francisco and I'm like, I have to tell you guys, my first concert ever was the Doobie Brothers. I had good taste in music then, and I still have good taste in music.
You must have had that moment a million times though, where like,
oh yeah,
you've got someone that you're working with, you're like, holy shit, this is weird.
Yeah, I grew up listening to your records in my bedroom in the 70s.
Right.
I started bringing a camera to concerts in '78 is when I first started bringing cameras to shows, and borrowed cameras from my dad and my stepbrother, and got my own first camera in '79. Or no, it was the end of '78 when I got it. Actually,
what was it?
Right before my 17th birthday, I think, is when I got my first camera.
What was it? I'm curious. A Yashica camera?
Yeah, but the thing, Yashica cameras had Zeiss lenses, so they'd really.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, good glass. So, yeah.
So was that gig in '78? Was that a paid for gig that you got hired to?
No. I mean, I was just a kid. Like the beauty about the Grateful Dead is that you were always just allowed to bring a camera into a Grateful Dead concert, whether you were professional or not. From the beginning of their career to the end, they never had restrictions on cameras.
Right.
So that's why there's all these great archives. So no, I mean, the first time I ever got paid money for a photograph was in 1979. I was still 17 years old. I met a guy who was a writer. Where are you from originally? I know you live in Florida now.
New York City.
From New York City. Do you remember a newspaper in Jersey called the Aquarian Weekly? It was a free weekly newspaper. It's like another free weekly newspaper that exists anywhere in the country now.
Right.
And I met a guy at a Dead show in the summer of '79. And he said, hey, I'm going to review the Dead show at the end of the summer, either in Rochester or Madison Square Garden. They were a couple days apart. Do you want to submit photos? And I did. And they paid me $7.50 each for 2 photos, $15 total. And that was the first time I was paid. I was 17 years old.
You're probably over the moon, man.
I'm like, oh yeah, of course. I mean, it's like nowadays, we're published every 30 seconds on our phones and social media, but back then to actually in print was like, it was
a big deal.
The experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens after the Meadowlands show in '78? Did they use your photographs?
No.
Okay, so this is just you.
I took pictures.
Okay.
And developed some prints in the basement in the dark room of my mother's house and thumbtacked them to my wall. Gave them to my friends to thumbtack on their walls.
Right.
You know, maybe by selling it to them for $1 a piece or something. You know.
Right.
You know, social media, man. That's the earliest form of social media. Sharing your 8x10 black and white glossies with your friends in person. I invented social media.
Oh my! Well, you know, that's going to be your quote every time I publish one of these. I have a quote. That's your quote now. I invented social media.
Please, no, don't do that. Isn't that like
I won't
to the internet?
I won't. That'll be all over the place. I'm like, oh, this guy Jay Blakesberg so full of shit.
So that was really my goal at that point. Was literally to just take pictures and hang them on my wall. I mean, I really didn't think about photography. Eventually I started making 8x10 black and white glossies and selling them in the parking lots of Dead shows for $1 or $2 a piece.
That's smart.
You know, come home with a pile of dollar bills in your pocket at the end of the night.
Yeah, that's smart.
Enough money to buy you tickets for the next show.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, what happened after that Meadowlands show is that I really got into the Grateful Dead. I started taking LSD and having my mind blown and listening to this psychedelic music that was like unlike anything else on the radio or that you can listen to. I mean, really back then there was no other bands like the Grateful Dead that were playing different music every night. I mean, the closest thing to it was maybe the Allman Brothers. But in general, I mean, there really wasn't anything like that where you'd go to a show and it was different every single night.
Yeah.
And so, I became part of the psychedelic caravan of misfits, following the Grateful Dead. And, first we were driving, 1 or 2 hours down to Philly or into the city or, and then all of a sudden it's like your 18th birthday in 79. I drove 8 hours to Pittsburgh to see the Grateful Dead. And, the summer of 79, I drove to Colorado and, all of a sudden, in the summer of 80, you're traveling all over the country and you're supporting yourself, selling 8x10s in the parking lot and selling large quantities of LSD to your friends back in New Jersey that you went to high school with and, selling sheets of 100 hits of acid at a time. And you're a full-on psychedelic cowboy out on the road with a camera and having the time of your life and the grandest adventure you could ever possibly go on.
Did your folks know what was going on?
Well, they knew I was going to shows and they knew I was selling pictures in the parking lot, but they didn't know that, this guy that I met at a Dead show was FedExing me thousands of hits of LSD, to New Jersey to go sell to my friends.
Holy shit.
But of course, that eventually, came back and bit me in the ass and I got arrested at a FedEx office in New Jersey, picking up 2,000 hits of acid and was arrested for possession of LSD with intent to distribute and was sentenced to 5 years in state prison and was spent most of 1983 in state prison in New Jersey.
Holy shit. What was that like?
It was a fascinating experience and a fascinating lesson in a lot of things. Living with a different group of people, living in a different culture, trying to survive, trying to stay out of trouble, trying not to piss anybody off, trying not to get beat up, trying to make friends, trying to go through a drug rehab program. I mean, there was a lot of things. It was a really super fascinating experience. And let's see, I went to jail in 83. I got out in late 83. So 98, I guess, is that 35 years? I'm bad at math. I mean, 2018 is 35 years from when I got out.
Right.
I did a big Instagram post about being in prison and getting out I got out in September of 83. And, I have a big Instagram following. You can find me at Jay Blakesberg on Instagram, just my name, Blakesberg. And I wrote an Instagram post about being in prison, and it was the 35th anniversary of me getting out. And there were a lot of comments. And a lot of people wrote things like, you're really lucky that this didn't happen to you just a few years later when the drug laws in this country changed with Ronald Reagan and mandatory minimums and stuff like that. Because I know people that got arrested a few years after me for less acid than I did or the same amount, and they spent 15 or 20 years in jail.
Holy shit. And you spent like 9 months.
I spent 9 months in jail, actually 8 months in jail. And so it really actually shook me to the core. It really scared me because I would have never become me. I would have never been Jay Blakesberg, photographer. I would have never been talking to you on this podcast. I would have never been sharing my artwork the way that I do or having the career that I have. I'm very, very fortunate, but it really, really shook me to the core because there are a lot of people that got busted back then and spent 10, 15, 20 years in jail for, because it got weighed by the paper that it was on. And the drug laws, Nancy Reagan, Ronald Reagan, it was, just a terrible, terrible time. But I got very fortunate. I got out of jail. I moved to the West Coast. I finished college up in Olympia, Washington. And then I had a girlfriend at the time, and I moved to the Bay Area in 84 or 85. I can never remember which. I think it was 84. And started my career. Started just like, what am I going to do? It was the mid 80s. We didn't have the internet to tell us how to act or how to have it.
Thank God.
There was no podcast host jobs back then.
Yeah.
There was no, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I loved photography, and I just started going out, bringing my camera to everything that I could shoot that was rock and roll. Base at the time, there were a lot of radio stations doing free concerts in the parks, and Golden Gate Park, and in Washington, Union Square here in San Francisco. And I'd bring my camera and I'd shoot, and eventually I started showing those photographs to different magazines. One of the first magazines that I showed it to was BAM magazine. It was a free bi-weekly newsprint magazine here in the Bay Area. BAM stood for Bay Area Music, and it was also down in LA also. And I walked into their offices one day and said, "Hey, here's a portfolio of some of my stuff, and I want to shoot covers for you guys." And they were like, "Ha ha ha! You've never shot a cover, And like a few months later, they called me up. They're like, "Okay, we have your first cover assignment. Can you go shoot Camper Band Beethoven down in Santa Cruz for the cover of BAM?" And I did. My first cover in '90, I believe it was, for Guitar Player magazine was with Michael Hedges.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so I had been showing my work to the art director down there. At the time, it was a woman named Peggy Shea, and she liked what I showed her, and she called me up and hired me. And you know who Michael Hedges is, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So
I actually had
Michael Hedges is
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, man.
So Michael Hedges is known for like two things, in my opinion: his extraordinary, original, groundbreaking guitar playing, and his long hair. Right? Right? He had this big long hair. And so when I shot him for the cover of a Guitar Player, 3 days or a week, no, actually it was about 3 weeks before the shoot, he shaved his head.
Oh my God.
And he freaked out, and he wore a hat in the shoot. So on the cover, he's wearing this like a Tibetan like beanie that he wore, and he's got little peach fuzz you can see under the hat, right? But he was so freaked out by it. So that was the one time I did a portrait of Michael. I went up to his house in Mendocino County. He lived in a school bus. Shot him all around his property, set up a backdrop, did portraits of him against a plain backdrop for the cover. He had a really cool, weird, I think it was a Stephen Klein guitar with like a double neck. And I'd have to send you a photo of it. It was such a bizarre, weird looking guitar. it was like, I've never seen anything like it. It was a guitar, and then it had this neck pole with 4 strings, 5 strings. I don't know. Remind me to send you a photo of it.
I will. I'd love to see it.
But this ground, anyway, so, did this great shoot. So then I didn't see Michael for 5 or 6 years, 7 years. And I got a call from his manager, and his manager said, "Hey, Michael's going to be playing in the Bay Area on Saturday, and we need new publicity photos. And we loved the shots you did for the Guitar Player magazine 6, 7 years ago. Are you available?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "All right, why don't we shoot from 11 in the morning till 3, and he has to go to sound check at 4. And they're like, "Great." And so he gets to the shoot, and he's got a bald head.
Oh my God.
From the last photo shoot 7 years before, when he shaved his head, he had not shaved his head for 7 years or cut his hair. And 3 or 4 days before the photo shoot, he shaved his head again. And he didn't remember this. He didn't know this.
Pretty random.
Random.
Yeah.
And so the 2 photo shoots that I did with Michael Hedges, he has a bald head in both of them, which is just one of those weird things. And then, of course, he died shortly after that in that horrible car accident where he slid off the road driving home. And, my photos, there was a record that was released post-death that they used all my photos on the cover. And inside from that second photo shoot. And, you know, it's just one of those things, you know.
A couple of questions for you. I'm
Let's see if I
I'm fascinated by like what was the biggest takeaway? Like you mentioned, and I think that's a very accurate statement. I wouldn't be myself if I hadn't had that experience. You know, I wouldn't be Jay Blakesberg today if I hadn't had that experience in jail. What were the most important things, either things that changed your viewpoint on life or lessons learned or just, you know, that you got out of that experience?
There are many, obviously. I mean, the first and foremost, most important thing I got out of that is that I did not want to go back to jail ever. And so as a freelancer, someone who was trying to make it on my own, you know, it instilled an incredible work ethic in me, which I still have to this day. Like, you know, I think at the time in the 80s, when I was trying to become a professional photographer and I loved rock and roll and I wanted to be a music photographer, you know, like everybody else in the world who wants to be a music photographer who has an iPhone or a Google phone, I worked extraordinarily hard at everything that I did. I took every shitty 2-bit $100, $200 job I could possibly find because I did not want to have to go out and get a real job. I didn't have to want to go work at the camera store or a film lab or, you know, I wanted to pursue. I mean, I remember at one point I was living in Oakland and I lived with 5 or 6 roommates and my rent was probably like $125 a month. And, you know, I mean, my first year in business, I think I grossed $7,000 or $8,000 that I lived on. And I remember I had no fucking money at all. And I was broke. And I saw an ad in the paper that said, looking for part-time contractors to deliver phone books, yellow pages in Oakland. Right. It's like a 5-day job, you know, must have a station wagon or a van or a pickup truck. And I had like a little old, you know, Toyota Corolla wagon, a 1975 wagon. And I drove over to this big warehouse in Oakland and I stood online and there was hundreds of people in there. And I stood there for 15 or 20 minutes. And I just said, fuck this. And I walked out and I said, I'm going to go out and figure out how to make money as a photographer. And I did not do it. I did not deliver phone books. I did not throw yellow pages on people's front doorsteps. And I just went out there and I just started just doing everything that I could and working hard and submitting photos to magazines. And I entered a contest in '88 with a local radio station called K-Fog, their classic rock station. I sent in 2 postcards that I handmade from photographs of the Who that I cut out of a magazine. And they pulled my postcard out of a big bin of postcards, and I won a free trip to New York to go see the 40th anniversary of Atlantic Records. Aretha Franklin, cool. Crosby, Stills and Nash, Foreigner, the Blues Brothers. It was Atlantic Records, all the greats, right?
Yeah.
Sam and Dave, this and that. But the big highlight was the reunion of Led Zeppelin.
Oh, shit. That's right. Yeah, this man.
The only American. It was the 3 of them with Jason Bonham on drums.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
And I had this one all access laminate pass from a thing in college that I did, which was an Olympic marathon trial. When I was in college, it was the first time there was a women's Olympic marathon, and they held the trials in Olympia, Washington, where I went to school. And so I had this plastic laminate that literally said Olympic marathon trials on it. It had nothing to do with rock and roll. And I wore it around my neck and I got backstage at Madison Square Garden.
Dude.
I got everywhere that I wanted to go with this piece of yellow plastic around my neck, right?
Do you still have that thing?
I own, the only pass that I own. I mean, I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these now, right?
Yeah.
And I walked the front and I got pictures of Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, double neck guitar, Stairway to Heaven, you know, the whole thing. And I came back to San Francisco and I sent the photos to the radio station. And the promotions director, who was the guy who called me to tell me that I won this trip, Kenny Wardell is his name, a lifelong friend still to this day.
That's nice.
And Kenny said, these photos are great. Can we publish them in our newsletter? They had like a printed newsletter at the time. It was called the K-Fog Inquirer. It was sort of like half comedy, half real. And I said, yeah, and they published them. And then he called me up and he said, listen, we have a photographer that we work with, but we're not really thrilled with him now. Do you do freelance work? Can we hire you? And I said, yes. And they were my first commercial client in the Bay Area.
Holy shit.
And they would hire me to shoot like some free concerts, and they pay me $200 or $250. But then they would order like $2,000 in 8x10 black and white glossies that I would print myself in a dark room that I rented downtown San Francisco in this little commercial. It was like a nonprofit photo gallery that had three private rental darkrooms in it. I rented one of them with two other guys, and they, you know, so I'd get like $2,000. I print all day and all night and deliver these 8x10 prints to them on time, which the other photographer, I guess, wasn't doing. And they became my client. And literally KFOG was my client for 30 years, you know, from 88, from that time on until they just shut down. Just like in the last 6 months, they changed formats after all these years. And they're sports radio now. And they were my client for all those years. They were my first client in San Francisco. And then in 87, November of 87, was the free U2 concert. And I had been submitting photos to Rolling Stone magazine for about 6 months. The photo editor there, I never met her, but she went to high school with a Deadhead friend of mine named Robin. And so Robin introduced us on the phone, and I said I would submit photos to Jody, and Jody would say to me, she was brand new at the magazine. She went on to have like a 35-year career at Rolling Stone also, maybe even 40. She was a brand new junior photo editor, and she said to me, I like your photos, Jay. They're exactly what we use, but I can't use you because we've never used you before, right? Catch 22.
Yeah.
But then, so I'd submitted probably 3 or 4 or 5 different things to her over a 6-month period. You know, I'd send her stuff in the mail, photos, and she'd be like, great, can't do it. We heard about this free U2 concert because they used the Grateful Dead sound system.
Okay.
So we'd heard a rumor that it was going to happen. And I got the phone call from my buddy. Oh no, actually I heard it on KFOG radio, right? So my friend who I was doing a column in another magazine called Relics magazine, which still exists today.
Sure.
Kind of covered the band scene. Was the first magazine I was ever published in. Before those Rochester Dead photos I got paid for, they published a letter to the editor that I had sent them in 78 when I was a junior in high school, with a picture of Jorma McAlkinen from the Jefferson Airplane Hot Tuna.
God, love that guy's playing.
Anyway, so we had heard a rumor. My friend J.C. Joannis, who was the writer for Relics, had tipped me off that this show was going to happen. I heard it on the radio in the morning on KFOG. I was putting my camera gear on. I was going to take Bart into the city, and I got the phone call from Jody. And I was walking out the door, and the phone rang. She said, "Hey, Jay, it's Jody Peckman from Rolling Stone magazine. I need you to shoot the free U2 concert downtown San Francisco." And I shot it. There were 5 other photographers that submitted their photos to Rolling Stone. They used my shot of Bono spray painting Rock and Roll Stops the Traffic on this big public art fountain that was there. It was very controversial. And they published my photo. And you know, immediately after that, Jody just started hiring me on a regular basis. Flew me to LA to shoot Roseanne Cash. There was a show that, and then I started saying, hey, there's this benefit happening here in the Bay Area with Carlos Santana, Bonnie Raitt, Jerry Garcia, Bob Weir, NRBQ, Boz Scaggs, Tower of Power. She's like, book it. Call the publicist. Hey, I'm shooting for Rolling Stone magazine, all access. They published a shot of Carlos and Bonnie Raitt, you know, in the article. And at the time, they had a writer, a full-time staff writer in San Francisco, a guy named Michael Goldberg. And Michael and I teamed up and did like hundreds of assignments together. When John Fogerty was being sued by Saul Zaentz and Fantasy Records for sounding like himself and Creedence, I went to the federal courthouse building and shot him in the lobby with his guitar because he was on the witness stand that day, showing them how he wrote Run Through the Jungle. And that's why it sounds like Old Man Down the Road, because it's the same guy writing the song, you know? And I have a portrait of him in the lobby of the federal courthouse in San Francisco, outside the metal detectors, right, in the main lobby, because they wouldn't let me inside or in the courtroom. I set up a studio light, and I did a portrait of him with his guitar, and that was like the lead photo in the rock and roll section about John Fogerty being you know, sued by Fantasy Records for sounding like himself. Do you remember that whole thing?
I do remember 100%. Yeah, and then he wrote a whole song, Zaentz Can't Dance or something like that. Yeah.
Zaentz Can't Dance. It's about Saul Zaentz.
Yeah. Holy shit. So, man, I have a bunch of questions. Okay. First question is, man, I love your work ethic and your hustle. Where do you think that came from? Or what drives that?
Fear.
Fear? Yeah.
Fear of like being homeless, fear of not having a job and having to sell drugs and going back to jail, fear of having to have a shitty job that I would hate for the rest of my life. And, being somebody who was, I mean, today it's funny because like I look at all the things that are going on in technology, with music and social media and content. And I'm like, wow. I mean, if I was a 25-year-old kid today or a 28-year-old kid today, like, I feel like there would be so many possibilities, so many creative opportunities. But back then it wasn't like that, so I really do believe that it was, fear of failure.
Right.
And I worked my ass off and and shot everything that I could because that is what I wanted to do. And that is what I loved. Right.
But I bet you're obviously not afraid today, but I bet your work and I'm sure you're more selective and you what you want to do, but I would imagine that hasn't changed, the work ethic.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, I still work 7 days a week, if I'm not out shooting, and I still shoot, typically I'm out shooting 2, 3, 4 times a week still.
That's
Because
awesome.
there's so much great rock and roll, I don't want to miss it. I don't want to have FOMO missing out, There's too much great stuff going on. All these bands, like young bands like Aqueous with Mike, who us. I love that band. He comes down, I go shoot a show. He doesn't have any money to pay me. They're like a struggling band playing to 150 people on a Tuesday night in Berkeley. That's the last time I shot them in the Bay Area. He was thrilled to have me out there.
Yeah.
But I met Mike when he was like, I mean, he's maybe 30 now. I probably shot Aqueous when he was 19. He played a little festival in upstate New York, Mowdown.
Yeah.
They were like, opening act on the baby stage. And I was like, and I think he knew who I was and he said hi to me. And I took a picture of him with Humphreys McGee guys because he was big fans of theirs. And then I did like a band portrait of him and they were teenagers, and I'm still friends with those guys,
He's a lovely guy, man. He really is.
And there's other bands that are like, in that genre, Twiddle and Pigeons Playing Ping Pong. And I mean, I should introduce you to Jeremy Shawn from Pigeons. I don't know if you know those guys, but
I don't.
He's incredible. Send me an email. I'll make an intro. I'll ask him if he's up for it. And, but I mean, they're like on fire, this band. I mean, Pigeons Playing Ping Pong. They really are one of the up and coming bands. Spafford, another incredible band. So there's all these, and I'm an old hippie and I like jam bands, so now, like, I don't need to go to the Coliseum to shoot some, up and coming Pop-Tart band from the soundboard when I can go to a small club and be leaning on the stage and get that energy and that excitement because it fucking turns me on. If you're not turned on, why are you doing it, right? I'm still turned on by this shit. It still blows my mind, this music. And back then it was just the Grateful Dead, and now there are all these other bands that are in that tree that the Grateful Dead sprouted out, and there's all these branches and all these incredible bands. Because listen, I love Tom Petty, I love the Rolling Stones, I love the Who, right? But you're not going to go see 10 Who shows on a tour where they're going to play the exact same songs in the exact same order every night.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I want to go see bands that are going to be, play improvisational jam band music, for lack of a better term.
Right.
And then go and take risks with what they do, because no risk, no reward. Totally. Right. That's how we all go on this magic carpet ride together. They take the risk and sometimes they fall on their face. Right. But other times that's when the magic happens. And that's what I'm looking for. And that's what I want to capture.
Do you know the guy? Do you know Rob Compa from Dopapod? They're another band in that category.
I do know Dopapod, and I really like Dopapod, but I actually don't know those guys. I know their manager.
They're great.
It's funny. I was at a festival last summer, the Peach Music Festival. It's in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Great festival. And their manager, is a guy named Coon, says, "Hey, Dopapod's playing. Will you go up and get some shots for him?" I'm like, "Yeah, I really want to see him." Right. So I go up on stage. And the stage manager or tour manager or production manager for the band looks at me and goes, "No photos on stage." Right? And I look at him and I go, I'm happy to leave, but the band manager asked me to do this. He's like, "Who asked you to do it?" I go, "Coonj." And then he goes and asks somebody else. And the guy's like, "Well, if Coonj said to do it, I guess he could do it." And then Coonj got there. And then they were like, did you really tell that guy?" And they're like, "That's Jay. Like, he can do whatever he wants. Like, we can't."
It's not his first photography shoot. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yes, I want him there. And like, we're lucky he's
God.
there. So, and I'm not saying that to like toot my own horn or anything.
No, I get it, man. It's
like, like I was ready to be like, okay, you don't want me here, I'm going to leave. Like,
yeah, of course.
You have to answer to your manager, So.
Another question I had for you is, what is your you're obviously really good with people, because you got to make, people, it's a vulnerable position they're in.
It's funny because did you watch the Cream documentary?
Which one? I've
Cream
seen
Magazine. No,
Cream Magazine. No, I did not. Is that on Netflix or something?
I don't know.
Prime? What's it called?
Cream Magazine.
It's CREEM for everybody listening.
CREAM is Cream Magazine.
EAM. Okay.
I don't know. Anyway, a good friend of mine who's a writer, her name is Jan Uelski. She was a writer at Cream. She worked with Lester Bangs. Lester Bangs.
Yeah, sure.
And she was a consultant on the film.
We're old.
Actually, narrates a lot of the film. I think that's her. I can't remember. Anyway, she used to always have this saying, rock stars are not your friends, because that's what Lester Bangs used to say. Right? You don't, like, you saw the movie Almost Famous, right?
Years ago, man. Yeah.
So Philip Seymour Hoffman plays Lester Bangs in the film, and he keeps saying to the kid who's writing, rock stars aren't your friends. Don't be, they're the enemy, right? And so for the longest time, like as a photojournalist, we all felt like we had to keep our distance to have a fair perspective, right? And I bought into that for too long, and then eventually these people became my friends.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is better for them being my friends. You get better access. They trust you more. And so it sort of became this shifted thing. But, the late, great, legendary photographer, Jim Marshall, who Jim Marshall was?
Yes.
He got Johnny Cash Flipping the Bird and Janice. If you looked on my wall right behind me, there's 10 or 12 of Jim Marshall photos right here. I help work for his estate. I do all the licensing for the Jim Marshall estate. So I, help their management team. Anyway, so, Marshall always used to say that the most important thing was trust, right? And I always subscribe to that as well, even pre-digital. Like, I don't want to publish a bad picture of somebody, because what's the point?
Yes.
Like, I want to publish good photos of people. And so, that's sort of where it shifted. And then with social media, like, I want to be in dressing rooms with artists when they're warming up before a show.
Yeah.
I want to be on the stage shooting them. I want to have all access. I want to get something different and unique, and not be in the pit for 3 songs and, have to leave, right? I want to get something different.
Yeah, for sure, man. So that just changed. Tough question to answer. Give me just your knee-jerk reaction, Jay. Favorite 3 assignments you've ever had?
Favorite 3 assignments. Well, there's been so many,
why?
but here's
I know.
Right? So I did an assignment for Guitar World magazine of John Lee Hooker. And they used to do these things where he would play a song and they'd have a writer there who would transcribe what he was playing. And I would take photographs of, like, his fingers on the different, chords and strings and hand positions and whatnot. And so I got to go down to John Lee Hooker's house while he sat there and played, Crawling King Snake and, all of his hits from the 40s and 50s and whatever, and have this like 45-minute private concert with John Lee Hooker, right? That was a great one.
He's another slight man, right? Very slight man. He was a very slight man, frail, thin guy.
Another great assignment was a similar thing with Jerry Garcia and David Grisman for the cover of Acoustic Guitar magazine. I knew that Garcia hated photo shoots, but I knew if we gave him a guitar and let him play, he would just sit there as long as you wanted him to. And he sat there for 5 minutes for me. And they had just put out a record of Garcia Grisman, so they were just working on songs. But I was shooting for the cover of the magazine. So Jerry kept playing and started singing. And I kept having to say, Jerry, just hum the song in your head. I can't have you singing because your mouth will be all like, like this if you're singing a song. So I'm like the only guy to like ever tell Jerry Garcia to stop singing. I'm in a private concert in Grisman's living room with me, my assistant, and the writer for the magazine. And I'm telling Jerry Garcia, stop singing,
Hey, man, you got to do what you got to do.
Right. That was a classic one. So many, legendary photo shoots, I love working with Joe Satriani, and I've shot a bunch of magazine covers with him and also an album cover with him rare moments being in dressing rooms and being in, places that you don't get to go if you don't have a camera.
Yeah. What
it's really become an entree to some really special situations in some special places.
What do you like about working with Joe? I had him on the show here. He's such a lovely, down to earth guy.
Well, that's Joe. He's
Yeah.
really down to earth, and I've done a lot of stuff with him. I probably have done a dozen photo shoots of him over the years for various magazines and record companies, and him, and he did a guitar strap endorsement once, and I did all the photos for that, and his clear acrylic guitar, and he's just a down to earth guy, easy to work with, friendly, fun. Joe and he's talking about working on a project with me. I was just at his house a couple months ago. I got to circle back with him now that it's the new year I can't really talk about it because it's his project, but
Sure.
has to do with some of his artwork. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. There's so many great artists that are just not pretentious and are just down to earth, like the Flaming Lips. I started shooting the Flaming Lips in 1989. And they became good friends of mine, did a book on them. It's a limited edition book. You can't even buy that book. I saw it on eBay for $800, right?
Oh,
It's
right
a limited book. It comes in a clamshell box. It's signed by me, another photographer who I did it with, who at the time was Wayne, the main lead singer's wife at the time. Everybody in the band signed it. I think they were $125 when we first put them on sale, and it sold out instantly. I've got 6 copies here maybe that are for sale if anybody's interested in the limited edition Flaming Lips book.
For $1,000 each?
No, I think I was selling it for $200 or $250, something like that.
That's really hey, if somebody's into the Flame Lips, email Jay. Yeah, it's Jay at Blakesberg, BLAKESBERG.com on that.
Yeah. So that was a fun project, but I became good friends with Wayne, and then didn't see him for a couple of years, and now he sends me baby pictures on a regular basis. He's my age. He's actually like a month older than me, so I think he turns 59 in January. A year older. Sorry, I just turned 58. I think he turns 59 in January, and he just had his first kid.
Did I see that a lot? Guys, because I'm 56 in our age range haven't, and I'm like, I don't want to say anything, but oh my God.
He sends me baby pictures on a regular basis. I'm like,
funny.
Baby Bloom, and so it's great. I recently became friends with Duane Betts,
right.
Dickie's son, and Duane, that's another guy you should have on the show. He's an incredible player. I'm happy to make an introduction.
Thanks.
He is phenomenal, and he can channel his dad like nobody, I mean, and I'm a huge Allman Brothers fan. I mean, Dickie is unbelievable, and Duane Betts is just such a sweet, beautiful player and a sweet man, just an incredible guy.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I keep meeting great people, and all these new bands that keep coming up, and like I said, I love having those experiences, and I love shooting them. And I just finished shooting Dead & Co. for a couple of nights, and Phil Lesh from the Grateful Dead just did a show, at his club, right? So I'm still shooting these guys 40 something years later.
That's amazing, man.
It's incredible. There's so much great music going on in this hippie jam band world that I inhabit. I can't quit the mob.
Is there any assignments that you had where you maybe learned something from the artist, whether it's life lesson, business, music?
Yeah, but I can't really, off the top of my head, I can't think of what it is. I mean, you always learn something about an artist, or as who they are as people. And, in general, everybody I work with has been very nice. I mean, listen, I've done photo shoots that have been 2 minutes long because that's, like somebody like Neil Young or Carlos Santana or Jerry Garcia, these guys have been doing photo shoots for 50 years, right? Well, Jerry out anymore, but Neil Young is somebody that I work with all the time for 30 years, right? And Neil hates photo shoots because he's done them so many times. But if somebody's hiring me to shoot Neil Young, my job is to get a brilliant photograph.
Yes.
Because if I don't, why would somebody hire me again? Right.
Yes.
And so, but Neil wants to just go do something else. He's got, super ADD, and he's on to the next thing. And he's such a creative, brilliant mind that, he just wants to get out of there. So when you could do a photo shoot with somebody and do it in 5 minutes, they love you. Right?
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
So planning, be ready, be creative, get in there and get out. Boom. And hopefully you're done. Right. Because these guys just can't do it because they just want to go have lunch or go do something else. They don't want to sit in front of the camera. It might be somebody else's very first portrait of Neil Young. Again, they want to do something creative and brilliant, but Neil's like, you got 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done a bunch of photo shoots with Neil, and they've all been 10 minutes or less.
Throughout his career, even. Yeah. That's just always
the very first time I shot him. There used to be a magazine called Tower Pulse magazine. Remember Tower Records?
Of course, yeah, man. I used to shop there all the time.
Cover of Tower Pulse magazine in '91. It was my first portrait of Neil. I actually have a photograph of him. He said, you have 10 minutes. I said, all right. And actually, he goes, you're done. I have a photograph of him holding up his watch and pointing to his watch.
And that was the shot. That's so funny, man. That's great.
That's what Neil is like.
What were your most difficult assignments, either because of logistics or if people were just douchey? And I'm not looking for gossip. So, like, if you want to talk the name, fine. If not, I don't really care. Just difficult.
I did a photo shoot with Metallica once where they didn't really want to be there. They had other things they wanted to be doing. So that was a little challenging. I'm trying to think here. It's a lot of waiting. Like sometimes you'll go set up somewhere backstage to do a shot, bring lights and studio lighting and be set up and hurry up and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. But I've done a lot of really rewarding projects. Do you know this company called First Act Guitars? Do you know them? So, well, it's interesting. So they made a fortune selling $100 guitars in Toys R Us and Costco, right? Beginner guitars, beginner basses, beginner drum kits. And about 15 years ago, they decided that they wanted to try and get into the MI store market and compete with Paul Smith. And so they went out and they hired a Luther and opened a guitar shop and started building these beautiful $5,000 custom guitars. And they started giving them to different people, like high-profile people. Nick Zinner from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Brad from Aerosmith, Paul Westerberg from the Replacements. And then they would take those $5,000 guitars and have production models made in China that they were, between $800 and $1,500 that they could sell in Guitar Center and wherever. They were trying to break into that. And they had me make a coffee table book of this process. And so we shot, I think, a dozen of these artists. And I'd spend the entire day with these artists hanging out in coffee shops or the recording studio or their house, all around the country. I went to Sweden and we shot this one guy who's in a Swedish punk band called International Noise Conspiracy, and another guy who was in a band called The Soundtrack of Our Lives. And so we flew over to Sweden and shot these two guys in Sweden for the book, and just all these great. It was just such a fun project, and we made a coffee table book, and they were using that as a marketing tool to get these guitars into these high-end stores and whatnot. But that was like a really super fun project that took about a year and a half to shoot all this stuff.
That is cool. Are they still around, or it didn't work?
They're not. Yeah. They're not. I don't know all the details, but I feel like they started another company within First Act, and they were making iPhone accessories and chargers and cases. And they spent a lot of money, and it sunk the company, and then they sold it. And I don't know what the status of First Act Guitars is. I know they're not doing the high end stuff anymore at all. But I don't know if they're still doing the low end kid stuff.
So I'm going to name a few artists that you've worked with. Tell me how you wound up getting the gig with them and a cool or interesting story about working with them. Let's talk about one of my favorite players is Warren Haynes.
I first photographed Warren for the first time when he was in Dickie Betts' band in '89.
Sure.
Warren wrote the foreword for the book that you have, The Guitars That Jam.
Right.
I just, over time, shooting him a bunch of times, he's a super nice, friendly guy. He was part of he was a founder, co-owner of a festival called Mountain Jam, which I directed the video at for a number of years and photographed for a number of years. When he was in the Dead in 2009, I shared a tour bus with him. We've just become friends over the years, and Warren is one of the nicest I'm out there. I love him to pieces. He's sweet. He's wonderful. And he's a badass motherfucking guitar player.
So cool. Yeah. I'm waiting for him to come on the show. I'm on the radar. He's just so freaking busy, as you know.
So busy.
I mean, he's literally the hardest working guy probably in music.
Yeah, he is. And I love the fact that he has jammed with everybody. He sits in with, it's almost in our scene about, Warren Haynes sit in, but I love Warren.
Santana. Oh, you talked about Carlos already. What'd you do with the Allman Brothers?
Well, obviously there's Warren,
Right.
And Dickie. In the bio that you read, I directed a live concert video with them at Mountain Jam, actually.
Okay.
I've have photographed Dickie Betts, and I photographed portraits of Greg Allman, and shot one of their last shows at Locken Festival before they retired.
Mm.
Uh, shot Greg Allman Band a bunch of times. Done a bunch of work with Derek Trucks and Tedeschi Trucks Band. Oteil Burbridge, who was,
Right.
it's funny, everybody, there's Barry Oakley, the bass player, Lamar Williams, Alan Woody, and Oteil Burbridge. Oteil was the bass player in the Allman Brothers for almost 20 years.
I
All
know.
those other 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
I was just
Maybe.
with Oteil tonight because he's in Dead & Co now. And Oteil's a dear friend, the sweetest man ever. So just a lot of different stuff. And, they're good friends.
Very cool. Yeah, I saw them at the Beacon in like just maybe I don't know, a while back. One of the greatest concerts I've ever seen, for sure. DJ Shadow, I love that guy. How did that come about?
That was a story in the very, very first online music magazine. It was called Addicted to Noise. And it was actually started by the guy, Michael Goldberg, who was that Rolling Stone staff writer in San Francisco. And he started the very, very first in this country online music magazine. And I was like the staff photographer for it. And he did a story on DJ Shadow, and Shadow came to my studio and I photographed him.
Is it cool?
They're great photographs. I had not a lot of interaction with him. Never really saw him again. Maybe one other time. So I don't really know much about,
About him,
or so on and so forth.
Alice in Chains.
Similar thing. Shot them at Lollapalooza. I shot Jerry Cantrell a portrait for, I think it was a cover of Guitar World magazine also many, many years ago, but no real personal contact. Like Soundgarden, I had way more contact with. Their first sound man was my college roommate. So,
cool.
I did a lot of early work with Soundgarden. So in the Seattle scene, it's sort of Soundgarden was sort of the band that I had the most relationship with through my friend Stuart, who owns a recording studio up in Seattle called Avast. And I've never met a Seattle musician who doesn't either know Avast or has recorded in Avast. It's like a very famous studio in Seattle. All the Slater Kinney records were recorded there, and a bunch of Built to Spill records. So Stuart grew up with two of the guys in Soundgarden back in Chicago, went to high school with them, and he was their first sound man. And when they first started playing clubs in the Bay Area, Stuart was there. I'd go out to dinner with the band and, got hired by the record company to do a bunch of stuff and, just did a bunch of early work with them. I mean, when Chris sadly passed away a couple of years ago, I have this photograph that I did at Lollapalooza in '92 backstage of all of Pearl Jam and all of Soundgarden in the dressing room.
Oh my God.
And I posted that on social media and had 1 million views in a week.
I'm not surprised, man. That's amazing.
The internet. Yeah.
Where is that? Is that on your Facebook?
Yeah, somewhere. You'd have to go back a ways.
That's awesome, man. Any tuition, one or two, I know, besides the getting thrown in jail, but any mistakes you made early in your career that you learned something from?
Well, yeah, we all make mistakes. I mean, I wish that I lit some things differently, or used different film that I chose, or developed the film differently than what I did. There were fads that we fell into in the 80s and the 90s, cross processing film and trying, weird alternative processes that, nowadays they look very dated. Back then they were very cutting edge. And,
Sure.
I wish I maybe didn't spend so much time doing some of that stuff. So,
That's just normal stuff that you do. And you put out any kind of creative work. Yeah.
Yeah. Gotta get weird.
Any advice, Jay, if you can go back, assuming you'd be open to listening, any advice you'd give your younger self that might have made your life easier?
Yeah. Shoot more film.
Shoot more film. Interesting.
Shoot more. It's funny, back in the day when we shot film and I was still like one of those guys that only got 3 songs in the pit and was out, I'd go in the pit and in 3 songs, I'd shoot 10 rolls of film.
Wow.
Right? And everybody else would be like, I shot a roll and a half. I shot 2, you shot 10 rolls of film. I'm like, yeah. And my philosophy eventually became, I'm only going to be in the photo pit this one day on December 14th, 1989 with the Foo Fighters or Nirvana or Soundgarden or whatever, whoever the band is. I'm never going to be in the photo pit again on this date with this band. Shoot as much film as possible.
Yeah.
It's done me well.
That's a hustler mentality, man. That goes with the whole work ethic thing and, make hay while the sun's shining.
Like I spent the money up front, but boy, has it come back and stayed over and over again.
Yeah, and look at how long the career you've had doing this. So, I mean, yeah, a couple of extra rolls of film.
Back then, nobody knew that I'd be the last guy standing, and I'm not the last guy standing, but like one of them. There's a bunch of us that 30 years ago, 35 years ago, and we're still working. But there's a lot of people, they shot for a year or 2 or 3 and they shot some great stuff and they couldn't make a living and they moved on to something else. And those photos they took, they're just in a box somewhere or in a closet. And, but because I've been doing it consistently, my archive exists and you can find my photos from, 40 years ago because I've scanned 80,000 pieces of film and what.
Wow. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Tell me the best 2 or 3 concerts you've seen.
Levon Helm's 70th birthday.
Wow. Was that at the barn?
No, that was at Mountain Jam. A lot of guests came out. Donald Fagen, Warren Haynes, Ray LaMontagne, Jackie
That guy's
Green.
great.
It was incredible. I was in tears. A recent show, there's a festival called Lock-In Festival.
Sure.
Happens in Virginia, south of Charlottesville, 45 minutes south of Charlottesville. I've been the principal photographer since year 1. We've just finished year 7. We got year 8 coming up this year. It's in the past, it's always been in end of August, early September. It's going to be in June this year. And one of the things that they specialize in is putting together unique jam situations. So a couple of years ago, they did a thing with Leon Russell and recreated Mad Dogs and the Englishmen with Tedeschi Trucks Band as the anchor band.
Yeah.
Last year, they did a similar thing with Tedeschi Trucks with special guest Trey Anastasio from the band Fish.
Sure.
Phenomenal guitar players out there.
Yes.
And I didn't know what they were going to do. I just never even asked. But they came out there, and the first thing that they did was they started playing a Derek and the Dominoes song. I'm like, ooh, this is cool. Right? First track off of Layla. And then a friend of mine who does a lot of work with Tedeschi Trucks, video directing and other stuff, and he's actually directing the Mad Dogs and Englishmen film from that Lock-In Festival, a guy named Jesse Lauder. Jesse says to me, he goes, you know what they're doing, right? I go, playing cover tunes? Gonna play some more Derek and the Dominoes? He goes, yeah, they're playing Layla beginning to end. The whole record.
Oh, the whole record.
Whole record. And so I've been listening to that record Layla since the 1970s. So 40 years I've been listening to that record. Like, and this might sound weird, you're in your car and you're listening to the classic Sirius XM channel 26 and Layla comes on. You might turn it off, right? You might listen to the song. You might turn it off. You're like, I've heard the song like 9,000 times.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to listen to Layla again. Or, hello, I really love this song. You know what I mean? When they got to the song Layla and Derek Trucks started doing this slide section, the Duane Allman slide section, I just started crying my eyes out. It was the most phenomenal thing. You can go find this online. Just look up Lock-In Festival video. I think maybe if you go to the Relics YouTube channel, you could probably find it there. If not, it's bootlegged out there. But the Relics, they have a YouTube channel, Relics Magazine.
Yeah.
So Lock-In Festival is owned by a guy named Pete Shapiro, who also owns Relics Magazine. So
right.
It's sort of all in the media family there. Go watch that Layla and tell me your mind is not blown.
Let me tell you,
Trey Anastasio kept saying, I'm doing this because Derek Trucks is my favorite guitar player. Because Derek Trucks very well might be the most, unpretentious, greatest guitar player ever. The other person who's like that is Jimmy Herring. You know Jimmy Herring?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
yeah. Panic, and also he played in the Allman Brothers for a hot minute, and with Phil Lesh and the Dead and what. Jimmy is the nicest man in show business, the sweetest, most gentle, incredible man. But he just sits there. I mean, he's a professional musician, I don't know, 40 years now, and he's just backstage doing scales, warming up.
That's how most of these guys are.
Every day. He is the master of that instrument like nobody else. Jimmy Herring is one of the most incredible guitar players out there, truly, and the nicest man out there. But that Derek and the Domino set with Tedeschi Trucks Band, anchoring with Trey Anastasio on guitar. And they also brought in Doyle Bramhill III. You know who that is?
Oh God, yeah, that guy's.
So they brought him in because he plays with Clapton and
Yep.
whatnot. So they brought him in as the auxiliary, who's also incredible. So that was the band. Tedeschi Trucks, Trey and Doyle. Unreal.
Holy shit.
You know, like a couple years ago at Lock, and they did a thing with Widespread Panic and special guest John Fogerty and did a Creedence set. Another year they did Widespread Panic with Steve Winwood and did like, you know, a bunch of Traffic and stuff like that. You know, one of my not new favorite bands, one of my favorite bands to shoot and see live is My Morning Jacket, right? These guys are mind-blowing. They've been on hiatus for a couple of years. They just did 4 shows this last summer. I did all 4 shows, 2 in Colorado at Red Rocks and 2 in New York, one at the Cap Theater, which is also by Pete Shapiro, Lock and Relics, and one at Forest Hills Stadium. Just mind-blowing. Jim James, Carl, I mean, the whole band, just unbelievable. Like, if you've not seen My Morning Jacket.
I have not seen them in concert.
Go change your life. You know, trust me. Like, unreal. So, you know, and again, Pigeons Playing Ping Pong. Like, you know, there's so much good music, you know. So favorite show, favorite moment. I've been very, very fortunate to see and experience so many magical musical moments and capture them with a camera.
Best decision you ever made?
Becoming a photographer.
You know, it's really cool.
Children.
What's that?
Having my children. Getting a dog.
I had your enthusiasm is great, man. You know, do you remember Jethro Tull? I had Martin Barr on the show, and he's like, yeah.
So I saw Jethro Tull. I think that was my second or third concert. My first was the Doobies. I think my second was the Eagles, Boz Scaggs, and Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh not in the Eagles in 1976. And then I saw Jethro Tull at Shea Stadium in 1976.
You didn't live far from the city, because it sounds like you were there all the time.
Yeah, I lived in Jersey, 30 minutes from Manhattan. Shea Stadium. A couple of years ago, I went to Iceland with my wife for vacation. Well, she had a business conference, and then we stayed for vacation. And while I was there, somebody saw I posted a picture, and then she said, "Oh, I have a friend who's like the head of like the radio station, and you know, the national radio station in Iceland." And so she connected us, and we met up, and he said, "Oh, I can't come at that time because I'm interviewing Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull." I go, "Phone interview?" He goes, "No, he's in town. He's playing tonight and tomorrow at the Harpa Center." I go, "Can you get me on the guest list?" He goes, "Yeah." So I went there and photographed it. And one of the 2 nights that he played there, they filmed it for a live DVD, but they didn't bring a fucking still photographer. So 6 months later, when they're making the package and the DVD, somebody finds out through this person that I have photos. So I send them all my photos, and I didn't really even have a long lens because I was on vacation. I just had a shorter lens, but I got a couple decent shots of Ian playing, and I think he was reproducing Thick as a Brick of that show, and then Thick as a Brick 1 and 2 is what he did, and they were making a live DVD. And it was summer solstice, so I had pictures of like the sun at midnight. And in Iceland, there's this moss that grows, that's 200, 300-year-old moss that's like this thick. It's incredible. And I had pictures of the moss, and they took the moss and Ian Anderson and the sunset and composited it all, and that's the cover of the live DVD.
That's cool, man.
You know, and again, like, you know, when I met him backstage, I asked him if I could take a portrait of him. He said no. He was not very friendly. But, you know,
that's what I've heard.
Whatever. And but I, you know, got the shots and got the DVD cover.
The reason I bring that up was Martin in his mid-70s. He's like, when I interviewed him, he's like, "Look, I got to go to practice now." He's like 17 with a guitar, and you're the same way, man. It's really nice to see, you know, your enthusiasm is really infectious with that. And I know, you know, he who has the most energy wins many times. And I know you bring that to a shoot. You know, most people are not really juiced.
Yeah, most people want to go up here. I want to get the next shot.
Yeah, right. You're like giving them juice, man, which really helps.
The waiting game. Excuse my running.
No, it's all good. Something about yourself people might be surprised to hear or find a little odd.
I wear a lot of purple.
That's not weird. You're a hippie, man.
I know. I am. It's absolutely true.
Do you have any non-musical superpowers, Jay?
I try and conjure up magic in my life whenever I can. I don't know if it's a superpower, but I think kindness and respect hopefully all play a role in making your life magical.
Well, they make it a lot less stressful, I'll tell you that much. That's for sure, man. Biggest business win and biggest personal win?
Well, personal win is, just being married to my wife for, as long as I've been together. We've been together 32 years, 33 years going on.
Congratulations, man. That's awesome.
Business win is just being successful, still being relevant, and actually still people wanting to hire me and pay me money to do what I do. I think that's the business win, that I still get to do what I do and sit in my office. I don't know if you can see, but I've got a great
pretty cool office there, man.
In my house with lots of rock and roll memorabilia on the walls, and some of it I created and some of it other people created. And, I just feel very fortunate that I get to do what I get to do and make a living doing it.
2 more questions, man. And I can't thank you enough for your time. Most toughest decision.
I know we got to wrap it up because I don't know if people are going to want to listen to me for 90 minutes.
Oh yeah. Trust me, man. You know what? It's only if it's boring. People don't want to listen to boring stuff. If it's interesting, they'll listen forever.
Okay. Hopefully I was interesting.
No, you're interesting. Trust me. I'm still talking to you. So you trust me. I would have been like, all right, Jay, thanks for your time. This is great. Toughest decision you ever had to make or most difficult thing you had to do?
I mean, there's probably been tough decisions like, do I go shoot this show versus this show, or take this job versus this job, or do I turn this down because the money's not right, it's just not fair and I have to hold my ground. Things like that, maybe. What was the question? Toughest what?
Toughest decision you had to make or most difficult thing you had to do?
Well, the most difficult thing I had to do was be in jail for 8 months.
Yeah. And last question, what's been the biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years? And how much of that has been intentional and how much of that has just been a natural process, natural part of aging?
As a freelancer, we're always scared that we're never going to get another job. 25 years ago, I'd go on vacation and, before there was voicemail, and I'd have a friend come over and check the answering machine at my house,
right.
Every other day in case there's any business calls so they can call them back and say, this is pre-email, 30 years ago, whatever.
Yeah, of course.
Saying no to a client thinking you're going to never get hired again because you're unavailable, you're traveling, or you have another job or whatever. So getting to the point where you're okay with all of that, right? You just be like, I'm all good. Like if I don't get the job because I'm, like a couple of years ago, the Doobie Brothers called me to shoot an album cover, and I was booked to direct video at a music festival on the East Coast at the same time. Pat Simmons lives in Hawaii. He was going to be in LA. They were all going to be there. They wanted, it killed me that I had to say no to that.
Sure.
I love the Doobie Brothers. My first, so there's things like that, but getting to the point where you're just okay with it, right? You're just okay. Just go with the flow. Don't be so obsessed with, going after every job. I mean, I'm 58 years old. I'm okay. Like I don't need to chase every other job and, and be possessive about things like that. Just kind of go with the flow, do my thing. Hopefully the work comes in still, like I said, and I've done a good job of creating my own reality. Like we were saying earlier, one of the ways that I make a living is selling fine art prints. People buy a lot of prints for me, and also selling books. I've published 15 coffee table books on my music photography, right? So you can go to my website, rockoutbooks.com, and order signed copies of any of my books. They're also available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and anywhere else books are sold. And, so how I make a living, I still get hired to shoot people and I get the occasional magazine assignment, but photography is a young person's game.
Right.
The art directors, the photo editors, they're all 25 and 30 years old and 35. They're not 58 years old. I'm old and in the way, but every once in a while I get the gig, I get the assignment. I still shoot stuff. I'm still relevant. People still pay me money to work with them. But I also have created like this other thing with my books and my prints.
Yeah, publishing.
publishing. And, you know, I also go around and I speak. I do these slideshow storytelling presentations and then sell my merch, sell my books and stuff like that. I do these 90-minute slideshows, talk about photographing the Grateful Dead for 40 years or my rock and roll adventure. I tell stories about working with Dr. Dre or Primus. I've been working with Primus for 30 years. I did a coffee table book on Primus. You know, I tell stories about working, you know, I'm getting ready to go to Mexico in a few weeks, and I'm going to be doing this presentation. It's a VIP Grateful Dead resort event, right? And so there'll be 6,000 Deadheads there. So I do my presentation two days in a row, and I'm changing the whole beginning of it to talk about how I first met John Mayer.
That's so cool.
And then how he, you know, and how we lost track of each other. And then when he joined Dead & Co., how we became friends again. And you know, this last summer, he played Jerry Garcia's Wolf guitar at Citi Field in New York City. And he called me up in March of that year and said, Jay, I'm ready. I want to play Jerry Garcia's Wolf guitar, and I know you're the guy that can make it happen. And I made it happen. So
that's cool. That's awesome. Yeah, you tell that to Deadheads. That's a great, man. Where are if people want to come see you speak, where do they find that? Is that
I'm going to be in Norfolk, Virginia on February. I'm going to look at my phone because I have to look at a calendar.
Do you post these though? Is this on social media?
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, it'll all get posted if you follow me on Facebook.
Okay.
Blakesberg Photography, which is a better place to follow me as opposed to becoming a friend on Jay Blakesberg, because I really don't post anything on Jay Blakesberg. I share the same stuff there. But Jay Blakesberg Photography on Facebook, Jay Blakesberg on Instagram, Jay Blakesberg on Twitter. But yeah, I think on Sunday, February 23rd, I'm going to be, I don't even know the venue. I know it exists. I'd have to go back and look because we're going to announce it like in the next couple of weeks, couple weeks. And then on Tuesday, February 25th, I think I'm going to be in Asheville, North Carolina, hopefully at the Gray Eagle, just waiting for a final confirmation. And then on the 26th, I'm working on another North Carolina date, and I'm not sure about that one yet. And then on February 28th, Friday, I'm going to be at the Botanical Gardens in Miami Beach. I think it's Miami Beach or Miami. I can't remember. But it'll all get posted on social media.
That's
and
great,
those will all be my Grateful Dead slideshow storytelling presentation.
Well, dude, if you make it over to Tampa, please let me know.
I have a couple of Robert Plant stories that I tell. I tell some Primus stories, Dr. Dre, Neil Young, and then a lot of Grateful Dead.
Very cool. Please let me know if you come to Tampa. I just want to ask you.
I did St. Pete a year and a half ago.
Let me know if you're back. Love to come out and hang. I'd love it. Talk about your last book about Jerry Garcia.
I have a new book that just came out in the fall in October called Jerry Garcia: Secret Space of Dreams. John Mayer wrote the foreword for it. And I asked John to write the foreword, and I said, John, I want you to write the foreword coming from the perspective of a guitar player, because you are a phenomenal guitar player. And I want you to talk about Jerry as a guitar player and what that music means to you from that perspective. Dave Schools, the bass player from Widespread Panic, afterward. A musician, radio host, Deadhead named David Gans. He has a show on Sirius XM, wrote the introduction. And Jerry's daughter, one of Jerry's daughters, wrote an essay for it. And then there's a whole bunch of quotes. Duane Betts wrote a great quote. He actually texted me last night. He goes, thanks for sending me the book, man. He goes, did you use my dad's quote? Because he got a quote from Dickie Betts also, but it wasn't a great quote. It was an okay quote, but I ran out of room. And I liked Duane's quote better than his dad, so I used Duane's quote.
There you go,
I got
man.
like Jimmy Herring and you know, all these different great guitar players. Warren Haynes gave me a quote. Jackie Green gave me a quote. Al Schneer from the band Moog gave me a quote.
Yeah.
A lot of great guitar players gave me quotes. And so there's quotes sprinkled throughout the book. And, you know, again, you can buy it anywhere books are sold. Rockoutbooks.com is my website if you want to order signed copies. It was a holiday book this year. It did really good business. Very well received. People love it. That's my latest book.
There you go, man. Listen, thank you so much for your time. And if you want to hire Jay, if you're looking to hire Jay to take photos, email him, Jay at Blakesberg. That's BLAKESBERG.com. Don't be a dick. Be nice. Be, you know, respectful. Let him know what you're looking at doing. Give him enough information so he can make
That's what I tell my children all the time. Mean people suck.
Yeah, they do, man. It's just too fucking stressful, you know?
There's just a reason.
Yeah, none. But I haven't heard in 600 and almost 50 episodes of anybody being a dick. So I think you'll be good with this crowd. But email Jay if you'd like to hire him. Just give him some information so that he can make an educated decision how to even respond to you. And go to rockoutbooks.com to order signed copies of all his books and get this book, man. Guitars That Jam. It's excellent. It's a really cool book, man.
You know how this book came about is I did a book called Jam, which was really about bands in the jam band world. Hang on a second here. Bands in the jam band world. And on the inside cover, I did a bunch of close-ups of different people's guitars. And I pitched that book to all these different publishers, Jam, and everybody turned me down. And the book was very successful. And then this one publisher contacted me and said, God, we made a mistake. We should have done Jam with you. Do you have any other ideas for a book? And I said, how about a book called Guitars That Jam, with a picture of a close-up of a guitar and then a wide shot of the guitar with the person playing it, and then the story of the guitar by the person playing it. And they said sold, and that's how that book came about.
Very cool, man. It's a great book. Thank you very much for sending it. It's really well made too, man. It's like well constructed. Like you could put this thing under a tractor; it would be fine. Not that I'm going to do that, but just saying. It's awesome, man. Jay, thank you. Any final words of wisdom? Anything else I left out? Anything you want to pitch? I love your balls that you have to go and say, hey, I'm going to send you this. That's not easy to find in the creative sphere, as you know. So my total respect for that, man. And you have to do that. Nothing gets bought unless it gets sold first. People don't really understand that,
right.
You know? So,
have a great 2020.
Likewise, man.
You and your podcast. Thank you for having me as a guest. And reach out to me about some of those other people we talked about. Duane Betts, Jackie Green's another good one you should have on your show. Do you know Jackie?
I know who he is from the Bay Area. Well, hold on one second. Let me say goodbye to everybody and we'll wrap up. All right. Okay. Everybody, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, please share it on your social media channels. Thanks very much to Jay Blakesberg for spending time with us. Again, go to rockoutbooks.com. Make sure you follow Jay on Facebook and on Instagram and support his books and what he's doing. He's a very talented guy and he's been around the block for sure. And most important, remember that happiness is a choice. So choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar and have fun. Until next time, peace and love, everybody. Jay, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Good interview.